You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at citizensedmond, as well as go bank there, because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password, because I seem to forget it daily. So yeah, go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome. This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Bank's where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode down at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our guest, Mr. Jacob DeVecchio, who is the owner of Oklahoma Fungi and founder of the Oklahoma Mushroom Festival. Jacob, thank you so much for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to come and chat with me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm very excited to get the chance to sit down and chat more. We've been back and forth for a couple months now, and it's great to finally get the chance to really talk about what we've both been doing and all the great things going on in Oklahoma.
Yeah, definitely. And so obviously, you know, Oklahoma Fungi, like that's your thing, and you got a festival coming up soon. Obviously, a lot of mushroom talk, and there's a lot to talk about with mushrooms, and you probably fight a lot of stigma with that stuff too, which is probably one of your biggest hurdles. But before we dive into the mushroom thing, tell me a little bit about you. What's your Oklahoma story?
Yeah, so born and raised in Oklahoma City, I'm the oldest of 6 siblings. The majority of our outdoor experiences were playing soccer, playing football, going backpacking, camping, hiking. But we were what we would consider an outdoor family, but we weren't interested in collecting wild plants or mushrooms. And so, in fact, growing up, we didn't cook a lot of mushrooms at home. If mushrooms came on pizza, maybe we'd eat them, but In the world of mushrooms, there's kind of two terms that we use: the mycophobic, the people who are afraid of mushrooms, and then the mycophilic, the people who like mushrooms. And so I wouldn't say that my family was either or. I'd just say that we're kind of indifferent about him. And it wasn't until college that I got really interested in mushrooms. And so in 2017, I was attending a microbiology class at Oklahoma City Community College. And a professor had mentioned kind of during the semester that we'd be learning about a bunch of different kingdoms of organisms. And one of the ones that piqued my interest was kingdom fungi. He said that there's millions of species yet to be discovered. There's some that are worth millions. And that really kind of caught my interest. And I didn't realize this, but there are many companies in Oklahoma, such as J&M Farms, who they're growing 28 million pounds of mushrooms annually. And people don't realize like the demand for mushrooms. And so for me, that, the professor kind of sparked my interest on what is this kingdom fungi and why are we only spending 2 days out of the semester learning about it? But you're saying that it's understudied and important. And so a lot of my classmates just kind of passed over it and went on to do other things. And the mushrooms just kind of stuck with me, and I decided that this was going to be something that I was really interested in as a hobby. I didn't quite know how to turn it into a business, and this was in 2017. And so at the time I was studying science just to get a diversified studies degree, but wasn't sure if I wanted to go into business or science. And so I ended up getting an associate's from OCCC, and from then on I started working at a lab doing analytics and stuff like that for petrochemicals, water analysis, and seed viability. So that was really cool. So I got to learn how to use a lot of scientific equipment, think about things objectively, and really think about the impact of water on seed viability and petrochemicals, kind of the whole cycle, and what is soil health. And so that really got me interested. With Oklahoma and the Dust Bowl, soil health is, what a lot of our big agriculture and what a lot of our farmers are looking for. We're looking to increase our soil biodiversity and overall health. And so I saw a lot of interest in that, and I decided that this was something that not only did it fulfill my passion of learning about science, but it could also pay the bills working for this analytical lab. And it wasn't until 2020 when COVID came around, and like a lot of businesses, that one unfortunately closed down. Mm-hmm. And I decided to start Oklahoma Fungi. And so when I started Oklahoma Fungi, I actually didn't know how to grow the mushrooms that I knew that I wanted to. And so, but what I had spent a lot of time was learning and understanding the life cycle of these organisms. And so for me, I really enjoyed learning the aspect of it, but then not having the jobs to support the hobby, now the hobby becoming the job, that kind of put more pressure on me to start growing. And so from learning to grow my lion's mane, my reishi mushrooms, my turkey tail, oyster mushrooms, coral tooth fungus, and just a lot, as many different varieties as I could find. After selling those at farmers markets and keeping those to make my own products, I eventually decided in 2023 that I needed to move on to education. And so the cultivation aspect was really great, but what it did is kind of kept me at home cultivating. Mushrooms, for the majority of their life cycle, don't need any pampering. They just need the right nutrients and the right environment. So they're not photosynthesize like plants. Uh-huh. They just need the food in their, what we call substrate. And so when we provide that to them, we really just give them time to digest, move on to the next stage of their life cycle, and produce the mushroom. Uh-huh. But it's at that last stage where we need to be there. And mushrooms, being mushrooms, really, they like to grow at all different times. And so as a farmer, as a mushroom farmer specifically, you always have to be there checking on your crops. And so I tour all over the country, and if anyone's interested in checking out my Patreon or YouTube channel or my Instagram or Facebook, I post videos all the time touring different mushroom farms, all across the country. Some of them organic, GAP certified, some of them just in a shed at a local hobbyist who's interested in showing me what they're doing. And so I really just try and promote the education aspect, and that's really what my main focus has been this year in 2024.
Yeah. Where does the passion for science come from a young age?
I would say the earliest memory I have is my mom purchasing an ant farm kit for me, and just being so amazed at the work that they were doing, and thinking how interesting it was to see them in action. And I think that the microscopic world is a lot more interesting than people kind of think it is. And so when you get a microscope out, it may seem a little bit daunting, like to have to learn how to dial it in and see the things in focus. But there's a whole other world to explore in when you look through a microscope, just kind of like when you look through a telescope. And so I think there's so much more to explore here on planet Earth, and specifically Kingdom Fungi. We only know about 7% to 8% of the known species across the world. And so there's plenty of chance for scientists, citizen scientists, and researchers to not only find new and unique varieties, but also to potentially have one named after them. And so, I've been very fortunate in being able to find some in Oklahoma, not that are unique species, but are in a sense rare, and being able to collect those spores and spread them throughout the state so people can start to recultivate these mushrooms.
Yeah. Endless exploration, right?
Endless, yes.
Right?
It's like the ocean. It's like, a lot of us grew up wanting to be a marine biologist. I know I did. And I think that in the soil, there's a lot more to be learned, specifically with truffles. In Oklahoma, we have pecan truffles. I've seen pictures of them, but most of the farmers, by the time I ask them to dry them out and mail them to me for DNA sequencing or what their address is, it's 2 or 3 days later, and the truffles have then started to degrade. And so if you're listening and you know someone who has pecan truffles, who's seen them in their pecan grove, please let me know, because this is an understudied variety in Oklahoma that potentially chefs could be interested in.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, right? You don't just go to the maybe the health benefits of it, but also like the taste, the cooking side of it. There's so many facets to mushrooms. Yeah,
absolutely. I have friends on the West Coast. Their entire livelihood comes from wild mushroom and plant foraging. Wow. And so throughout the year, they're traveling up and down the coast, selecting different plants, different berries, different herbs, different mushrooms, collecting them, processing them into maybe soup stocks, or maybe it's mushroom powders or mushroom salts or mushroom tinctures, etc. And so I have friends that really their entire livelihood comes from seeking out these mushrooms. And my life doesn't revolve around foraging. It's more so on the education and cultivation aspect. But it's incredible to see people who travel. And I would say the most common mushroom that people will travel for is the morel mushroom. And so in Oklahoma, the morel that we find is the Morchella americana. It's a very beautiful blonde morel mushroom, and I've been very fortunate to be able to find a lot this past year. It was a really great season. And so for this mushroom specifically, it can go anywhere from $25 to $40 here in Oklahoma. And so on the West Coast, I know people that are going foraging in Oregon, coming back to places in California and reselling these same mushrooms at $85 a pound. Wow. And so they're location dependent, like most consumer goods are. But what's really cool about them is that in Oklahoma, as you travel north, so the season starts in Texas. So in Oklahoma, we can drive down to Texas, forage some mushrooms. 2 weeks later, they'll start growing in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And then when we forage here in Oklahoma, 2 weeks later, they're in Kansas. And so it's not that particular time period. It takes a bit longer. Yeah. But in a sense, you can follow the mushrooms and chase them all the way up to north to Minnesota and to Michigan.
And that's just based on the heat?
Just based on the soil temperatures rising slowly. And, believe it or not, there's mushrooms that are as large as, I've seen morel mushrooms as large as this water bottle. Wow. And so it doesn't always take 40 mushrooms to make a pound. Sometimes you can just find one mushroom that equals a pound, and that $40. Now in Chicago, I know people that are doing them for around 75. And so in these larger metropolitan cities, I'm sure in New York they go for maybe even higher. But it's really cool because in Oklahoma we have the opportunity to go out and either make some money or collect these mushrooms and eat them and enjoy them with our family.
Yeah. How do you explain what you do to your parents?
This was an interesting topic that was brought up on a panel that I was in Santa Cruz, and it was kind of like, how does your family feel about you having a mushroom company? And so for my family, their biggest concern always was the progression of my learning. And so my parents always want me to be, in a sense, moving forward. I mean, I have it tattooed right here on my hand, on my forearm, and so my parents always want me to be learning, always to be doing something. And so when they saw that I was passionate about mushrooms, of course, mushrooms have this stigma, like we mentioned in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so it definitely took some time to show them, and really my parents were easier to convince when they saw that I was confident enough to set up at a farmer's market booth, because who in their right mind sells magic mushrooms at a farmer's market booth? No one. And so by selling these lion's mane mushrooms and oyster mushrooms, I gained reputability like from my parents, and they realized like, okay, if he's really spending all his time researching how to grow mushrooms, we'll see which kind of mushrooms he's growing. And so ultimately, lion's mane, oysters, reishi, turkey tail, and a couple other varieties ended up being the staples that I would take to the farmer's market.
Yeah.
Now, when I was there, it was actually a lot harder to break the stigma with the customers. Every third customer would come up and say, hey, are those magic mushrooms? Can I buy them? And so unfortunately in Oklahoma, the lack of education around all mushrooms, and not just Oklahoma, but the greater US, is led to really three categories of mushrooms: the poisonous, the psychedelic, and the button mushrooms, right? Most people don't know any more mushrooms aside from the buttons. And so that's the mushroom that J&M Farms grow. And they're growing 28 million pounds a year. So most people are familiar with the little blue bin that they sell at the markets. And so you can find them all up and down the Great Plains. And so unfortunately, at the market, I was dealing with a little bit of stigma, having to talk with people. The goal of me being here is to educate you and to help break that negative stigma. And so by finding success and being able to build these connections with the farmer's market director first was important. And that gave me greater confidence that I knew that I could be there, that even if someone came up and said, are those magic mushrooms? And I said no, and they went to go report that I was, the farmer's market, they already know what I'm doing. And so ultimately it took a lot of patience, took a lot of education. And through that, I've been very grateful to have a customer base that trusts me and that continually comes to my education classes or to the Mushroom Festival to learn.
Why did you decide to go the education route versus, you're building these connections, you see examples of I can make this a business, and whether that's chasing, kind of the morels or wherever it is that you want to go to forage mushrooms instead of doing, because education is not easy, right? But education is not easy when there is a stigma around such a product too, right? And then when you mention psychedelics and go down that kind of wormhole, people just turn their brains off, right?
Yes.
Especially in the Midwest. Probably they're a little more open to it in California versus here, right? And so, interested to hear, like, where does the education kind of fire come from inside you? And do you have people in your life that are educators as well that you may have seen that growing up?
Yeah, so both of my parents are, they both run the same business. And so mom and dad grew up, and I grew up in a family of mom and dad being entrepreneurs. And so what I really loved about that, and sometimes it was annoying having to manage all my siblings. Like I said, I'm the oldest of 6, and if they're listening, it's okay. But ultimately, having to be at work with mom and dad, and whether it was in the car or in the office, I got to spend a lot more time with my family. And so, in college, when I was taking these business classes and these finance classes, I was always interested in, I really liked the entrepreneurial side, and but I also really liked the science. And so, at the time, in 2020, when I lost my job, like when a lot of people did during COVID, the company that I applied for, I was looking to work for a mushroom company. I had applied to work for a mushroom company out of state because I couldn't find any in-state outside of J&M Farms. And so button mushrooms weren't my passion, and more so lion's mane, medicinal mushrooms, functional mushrooms. And that's really my goal and to bring, because Oklahoma has an incredible array of medicinal, non-psychoactive mushrooms that a lot of our tribal nations are using, that a lot of our tribal nations hold sacred, and that are also very good for us and also for our pets. And so I really, education is difficult, but what really got me into it was having to travel outside of Oklahoma to learn. And so there wasn't any educators, there was no mushroom festival, there was no free mushroom classes, and so majority of the education at the time was all online. And so I've spent now well over $10,000 since then, traveling, learning, attending conferences. And that was all before I became speaker. And so now I'm very grateful because with my persistence has come a great reputation for presentations, especially on the West Coast. And I've been very thankful to be able to travel and be an educator. Not many people from Oklahoma get the opportunity to travel and especially educate about mushrooms. And so I've always tried to portray myself as very family friendly, very open educator, and available to the public. And by hosting those free education classes in 2023, I did 3 free education classes a month. And so I was always interacting with the community, doing community outreach, and really interacting with people and seeing, what are the stigmas and how can I better approach ways to break them down and help people grow the mushrooms they want to at home without worry that they're going to turn into something that they can't.
Yeah. When you go to these, actually, let's start with that. Where do you teach your classes?
So this weekend I'll be teaching a class at Organics OKC Garden Supply. That's over near 23rd and Northwest 23rd Street and Penn Avenue. And that class will be from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. It's a free class. I'll be going over how to cultivate mushrooms. And so it's a very open, general class. The first hour is just my instructions and talking about the life cycle of mushrooms, basically giving people an introduction into what they might be doing if they decide to cultivate. And then that next hour is me there mingling, checking out what other cultivators have, and really just interacting with the community, kind of like a social hour, if you will. And so the whole 2 hours isn't education. It's the first hour of education and then the second hour of social.
Yeah, and like I said, you get to connect and ask, people get to ask you questions during that second hour that maybe they wouldn't have if it's in front of a whole group, right? They get to pull you aside and you kind of add value that way.
Yeah, or if they're not comfortable with email or messaging on social media, I'm always trying to interact and host these events so that way people can come in person. And so I have one also coming up, the first ever Farmers Market District Festival. That's going to be happening June 2nd. I'll be doing a presentation there on how to cultivate our native mushrooms. So for all the gardeners out there who are listening, if you're already spending time on your hands and knees out in the beds, you can grow delicious mushrooms right on the same mulch that you're cultivating your plants in. And so really my goal as an educator, not just on cultivating mushrooms, but how to cultivate better nutrient-dense food. And so what we're looking for is how to use less water and how to make more nutrients available to our plants, and ultimately will come to our mushrooms.
When you go, like you said, you put in the time and then you go into all these conferences, and now you're going back as a speaker, do you speak about sort of the same thing every now? Like, how does that work as well?
Yeah, so typically it all depends on the requirements of the event. And so for the event that I'll be doing in Texas, the second annual Texas Mushroom Conference, my first presentation will be about cultivating mushrooms from the wild, and I call it From the Field to the Lab. So it's how to collect a mushroom that you find growing out on your tree, on a tree stump or in the grass, how to take that and be able to recultivate it indoors. And so a lot of mushrooms like lion's mane, oysters, reishi, they grow very prevalent here in Oklahoma on our oak and on our hardwood species. So you can collect those mushrooms, and instead of only being able to enjoy them like 1 or 2 times of the year, you can collect their genetics and be able to regrow them indoors throughout the year. And so that'll be my first presentation. Then my second presentation will be called Mycomaterials. So it's actually how to use mushrooms as a replacement to styrofoam. So cultivating just what we call the vegetative state of the fungus, the mycelium. And so that mycelium is a great material that we can use to create custom fabricated molds and forms. And the computer company Dell is actually already using some of these mycelium composites to hold their servers and computers when they ship them out instead of styrofoam. And so mycomaterials are a big passion of mine, teaching people how to use mushrooms for alternatives, whether it's for food, for people who are interested in vegan lifestyle, how to use mushrooms in many great recipes instead of meat. And so I'm interested, my greatest interest in mushrooms is how to get more people interested. Right. And I think that there's so much to explore that even if I dedicated my life to exploring one thing, that's not enough. We need more people interested. And so I found myself in this balance of wanting to cultivate, but not being able to stay at home because Oklahoma is not known for mushrooms. And so the state that is known for mushrooms in the U.S. is Pennsylvania. And so every year I go out to Pennsylvania for their mushroom events. And I've also recently started going to California, and also this year be going to Denver. And so I'm really trying to not only get out more, but go there, learn what they have, and bring it back, and be able to host a lot of that information at our own mushroom festival.
Yeah, it's that's the tough part of what you do, right? It's like, what kind of element or what side do I dive into? Because there is so much to do. Because if you tried to do it all, you wouldn't sleep, and you wouldn't enjoy it either. But yeah, it's just trying to figure out, like I said, and having your own festival. It's obviously there's a key need for that.
Traveling. A lot of, not only is there a key need for a mushroom festival, but we need more mushroom information, like a mushroom guide. So our state doesn't have an official mushroom guide, and none of the universities have ever produced an official list of our native mushrooms and their edibility. And so right now, the Oklahoma Poison Control doesn't have a list of our edible and toxic mushrooms on their website.
It's kind of an issue.
In fact, they actually have mushrooms listed under the plants section. And Kingdom Fungi and Kingdom Plantae are, two different things. And so what we're trying to do before the festival is produce, and I already have the rough draft, so I have 187 mushrooms that I need to reduce down to about 63. And so that 63 will be what is in the first edition of the first ever Oklahoma Mushroom Guide. We hope to have that published and available for pre-order and pickup at the second annual Oklahoma Mushroom Festival in October.
Yeah, and that is like to collect, to eat, or is that, all things?
To dive into the mushroom guide, the benefit of it is that it's going to be waterproof, foldable, and it can fit in your back pocket or your front pocket. And so it's something that you can take out on the trail with your kids, with your dog, and if you drop it, it's not going to tear. It's going to be laminated, and so that way you can rinse it off underwater, you'll be able to fold it back up and take it back out on the next trail. It'll have roughly 65 of the most important fungi, native mushrooms that we can find. And so I'll really classify them into 4 different categories. We'll have the poisonous mushrooms, the ones you want to stay away from, the ones you want to make sure that aren't growing in your front yard in case you have kids or dog or cat, whichever type of animal you may have. And so the poisonous ones is one category that I'm going to include every species. Now, there is another category that most guides will consider poisonous, but really they're not poisonous, they're psychoactive. And so the psychoactive mushrooms will also have their own category. And so that is to help to break the stigma that psychoactive mushrooms are not deadly poisonous. And so there's going to be 4 different categories. There's going to be the poisonous, the psychoactive, and then we get into the edible. And so really the importance of the guide is to show people that there's a lot of different varieties, and the edible ones are the one that you want to go for. And so in the edible, they'll actually have 2 different icons. One is going to be a choice edible, and one is going to be just edible. And so what I mean by that is there's some people who are interested in eating things just because they can eat them without getting indigestion. Personally, I like to take things through like a culinary lens, and if it's not delicious, if it doesn't have medicinal value, I typically won't eat it, even if it's edible. Yeah. And so in the guide, I'm going to break that down for people, because even though it's edible, it might not mean that it's delicious or that it has benefits that you may want. And so now that last category, so we have the poisonous, the psychoactive, the edible, and the non-edible. And so the non-edible is going to be species that we're not quite sure what this mushroom does. Is it delicious? Is it psychoactive? Is it poisonous? I'm not going to be the one to find out, and not a lot of people are going to sign up to, and if you do, I'm not going to recommend it. And so ultimately, scientists and a lot of university graduates, what they do is they take these mushrooms and then they analyze all the different spectrum of compounds within them. And then they go through each compound to figure out if it's poisonous or psychoactive or not. And that takes a long time, also takes a lot of money, and a graduate student or professor with the interest and time to research that. And so in Oklahoma, that's never been available. That's why we don't have a guide. And so ultimately, by writing this first guide, I can hopefully educate our community on the mushrooms that they want to stay away from, and the community that wants to go out and learn how to forage these edible mushrooms, like people who are already outdoors hunting or maybe already outdoors backpacking. There's mushrooms out there that you can eat that are delicious. You just have to prep them in the right way. And all mushrooms, are edible, some only once, and so that's, you got to be careful on identification. If you're not 110% sure, when in doubt, throw it out. And so it's not worth your life. It's not worth your family's well-being. And so typically, if you don't have access to a guide, if you don't have access to an expert that you can send photos of, you can always send photos to me, oklahomafungi@gmail.com, or you can go to the website and do the submission through there. I'm helping people daily with mushroom identification. Yeah. They'll send me pictures of them. I'll send out what I can. And kind of on that topic, I do want to mention that all of the apps that are AI technology that are helping you to identify mushrooms. I'll tell one story about an unfortunate. Nothing happened, but this woman was very close to eating a poisonous mushroom because Google had classified it as a magic mushroom. And so there are a lot of people that are interested in magic mushrooms and that have gone out into the cow fields and gone out and eaten the wrong mushroom, and they've been sent to the hospital. And so this is what would have happened to that lady had she not reached out. And so a lot of the AI technology, what they're doing is taking all of the different photos online and putting them together and classifying them. And as we all know, the names and the data that's attached to those photos might not always be correct. And so unfortunately, with Oklahoma not having a guide, it makes it a little bit more difficult. You reach out to Poison Control, and then they'll reach out to Clark Overborough, the University of Central Oklahoma. He's our state's head mushroom taxonomist and toxicologist, if you will. And so when people need mushroom ID for poisonous mushrooms, they call him. He's a great friend of mine. He spoke at our first annual Oklahoma Mushroom Festival. But what he wants to see is less calls. And so how we can do that is by providing education, by producing the guide and hosting this mushroom festival.
Yeah. Have you had any kind of high-end restaurants reach out to you wanting your products and wanting to help, or even just sourcing? And I mean, it seems like Oklahoma-grown products, obviously, that's a huge, selling point to any restaurant, really. It
is, absolutely. And, regenerative agriculture is very large. When you go to the farmers markets, you see that a lot of these regenerative farms sell out fast. A lot of the farm-raised chicken eggs, those are the first. Everyone knows the price skyrocketed when COVID came around. And so, a lot of people are interested in learning how to cultivate their own food, or maybe raise their own animals, or cultivate their own mushrooms. And so for the quality of the food, that's what we're searching for. We're searching for, I like to say, shop your local anything. Anything that you can buy locally directly from the farmer or the cultivator, or, no matter where it is, no matter what business it is, to keep the money local and to support our local economy will help build social equity with you and your customers, or you and the vendors that you're working with, but also to just help Oklahoma overall. And that's what we really want to see, is Oklahoma grow and to see these mushrooms grow with Oklahoma.
Yeah. Talk about the health benefits a little bit, and also tying into that, you mentioned kind of the native side of things, and that they have been using this for a very long time, and also where the educational side of mushrooms has probably been lost over time because of bigger companies coming in and selling products, and that's not just happened with mushrooms, that's happened with a lot of foods, right? That just bigger companies with marketing dollars are telling us that these foods are bad, and they're really not. They're really good for us. So I'd love to hear you talk about just kind of the history, I guess, of mushrooms, as well as the physical benefits as well.
Yeah, well, so a lot of the cultivation history, knowledge, R&D, a majority of that comes out of Europe or comes from Asia. And so everything that's being done in the U.S., if it's not under a particular patent, has been knowledge gained from other continents. And so in Asia, specifically China, Japan, and Korea, these countries have been cultivating mushrooms on incredibly large scales for centuries. And so there's one mushroom in particular, the cordyceps mushroom, that thousands of years ago was deemed only for the emperor. And so anytime anyone in the entire kingdom found this mushroom, it had to be delivered to the emperor. And so, throughout time, mushrooms have been seen as very important. And I think it was about 5,200 years ago, Otzi the Iceman, an ancient human being, was found in the Italian Alps. He was frozen in a glacier, and he was found by some hikers. And on this, they thought he had passed away recently, but when they brought all his stuff down, the team that did the not sure if you call it an excavation or
Sure,
what you'd
yeah,
call
recovery,
it. But
whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. When
Yeah.
they did the recovery, they analyzed the bones and realized that this guy was not from our time period, that he was from thousands of years ago. And the more fascinating thing was that he had tattoos. And so he had these marks. And so what scientists believe is that early humans would injure themselves, would cut themselves, and then put these plant-based pigments into their skin. And after their skin healed, then they would have a very early stage tattoo. And so not only did he have a tattoo, but he had 2 different species of mushrooms with him. He had one that was on a lanyard around his neck, like on his chest. This was the chaga mushroom. So this is a mushroom that's very high in antioxidants, and it's one that's being researched very heavily for cancer, along with turkey tail. And so he was found with that one, along with the amadou fungus. And so this is also known as the tinder fungus. It's a mushroom that's very flammable. And so scientists and researchers speculate that the uses of the 2, one being medicinal, one being functional. And so this is just one example in Europe, but this in particular wasn't for cultivation. And Asia is really where we see a lot of our knowledge come from on the large-scale cultivation. So in the U.S., we don't have a large-scale commercial cultivation for morel mushrooms, as much as everyone wants one, and whoever does eventually figure it out will be a multimillionaire. Right now, all of the morels in the off-season that aren't found in the U.S. come over from Asia. And so in China, they've figured out different species of morels that will grow in outdoor greenhouses with supplemental nutrition. So they can get them to grow year-round with sunlight without having to worry about the soil temperatures fluctuating. Yeah. And so the species that we forage in Oklahoma isn't the species that they grow. And their culinary taste and value, I'm not sure. I'm kind of indifferent on. I haven't had the opportunity to try morel mushrooms that I know were grown in China. All of the mushrooms that I've eaten have come from the U.S., whether it's from the Great Plains or from the West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's fascinating stuff, right? And like you've said, I mean, there's so many ways to look at it and so many ways to take it and things to dive into, and never enough time.
Yeah,
you're already spread thin traveling around educating right now. I can't imagine adding in, just looking at one species as much as you can into that.
And I have friends who've dedicated their entire career and livelihood to one species, and they're breeding. What they're doing is they're collecting wild forage varieties, and they're hybridizing them with commercial varieties, so we can get these more resilient but higher medicinal value mushrooms. And so when we think about plants and we think about growing mushrooms, what we're not necessarily looking for is the highest overall yield. What we're looking for is the highest nutrient density. And so what we're looking for is something that's really high in the nutrients that help our bodies. And so the health benefits of mushrooms, range from helping with weight loss because they're high in fiber, but also helping with a lot of minerals, general vitamins like potassium, magnesium. There's a couple other minor things that they can help with, but lion's mane in particular is one that I really want people to look into. And this is one that's been shown to help with to spark nerve growth and to help with neurogenesis. And so this is really important for Alzheimer's, for Parkinson's, for anything like neuropathy, for fibromyalgia. This is a mushroom that is really good for nerve pain and just to help with essentially stimulating your nerves. And so anyone who's had head injury or anything like that, this mushroom is of very much interest to scientists and researchers. And another mushroom that I think people would be very interested in is turkey tail. This is a mushroom that you can find almost all throughout the year, but it does have a look-alike. Now, the look-alike is not poisonous, but it will cause irritability and indigestion. And so the turkey tail is the Trametes versicolor, and then there's another, what we call false turkey tail. And so false turkey tail has a very smooth underside, and turkey tail has these tiny little circles, these little pores. And so you can tell by flipping the mushroom over and looking at the underside which species it is. And if you have trouble, like I said, you can always send me pictures or submit them to the website. But the goal is that what we can do is get these outdoor varieties that are higher in medicinal compounds, they're more resilient, and be able to collect those and consume those. Uh-huh. And so, not everyone wants to get outdoors and forage, and that's okay. But what we want is to provide the opportunity for those that are interested. And also for those that aren't interested in getting outdoors, We have products like I have a line of tinctures, I have a line of gummies, I have a line soon coming of chocolates. So all of these infused with the benefits of the mushroom without the taste of mushrooms. And so what we're doing is extracting the essential oils, if you will, of the mushroom, the essence of the mushrooms, and putting them into alcohol-based tinctures or gummies if you're not interested in the alcohol-based tinctures, or the chocolates if you're not interested in gummies. And so we're trying to provide a nice array of ways for people to take that first step into the world of mushrooms and break the stigma of, oh, they taste bad, or, oh, is this going to kill me, or all of those negative stigmas that we typically hear about.
Yeah. Take me through just kind of a typical day or week of like how you put mushrooms in your life, in your diet, and kind of how that looks as well, just to kind of educate people on that side.
So when I wake up, one of the first things that I'll do is whether I drink a smoothie or just a protein shake, I'll put some of our tincture into it. And so the tincture really is a concentrated extract of the mushroom. And so now the benefits of a lot of mushrooms are in the tiny compounds that are within them. And so, yes, they're high in fiber and all these other minerals, but majority of the research that's being done for the neurogenesis, for the nerve benefits, is on the extract of the mushroom. And so you would have to eat a lot of this mushroom fresh or cooked to be able to get those beneficial compounds. And also when you cook, you also sometimes cook off the beneficial compounds by going too high of temperatures. Now, mushrooms themselves really have a hard time burning unless you put them like on a flame grill. But for the most part, these compounds are really volatile and they will evaporate and they will get cooked out. And so by extracting them and keeping them in ethanol or in alcohol, the majority of the compounds are maintained, and we can make a tincture that's 50-50. So it's half water and half alcohol. And so this is very, very beneficial for the concentrated extract. And so there are other options, like we have capsules, which I didn't mention before. So we just take the mushroom, we blend up the mushroom, and we put that in a capsule. But the capsules aren't going to be the same equivalent of potency. You need more capsules to get that tincture dose. And so what we're trying to do is provide an option for, maybe if someone is interested in consuming alcohol-based tinctures, whether it's sobriety or they have indigestion with alcohol, maybe they can't take it due to kidneys or something. And majority of the gummies or the chocolates are all very low sugar. They're all vegan, non-GMO, and what we're really trying to do is provide options, but also provide the education. And so we don't just want people to consume the chocolate and think that the chocolate is going to be the same benefit as consuming the tincture. There's different levels, different potencies, and it's through that education that we really can start to educate a customer. And so from my morning, I'll wake up, I'll take a tincture. Typically for breakfast, I'll eat fruit or like I like to eat cream cheese and jam on a biscuit. And so that's really good. For people who don't like to take a little bit of the alcohol-based tincture like sublingually is the best. You're going to get the most benefits from that. But you can also mix it in with your protein shake or mix it in with your things. I found that mixing it with like a pineapple, mango, or orange juice helps to kind of cut the alcohol flavor, and that was really good. And so on our label, we put mix with your favorite alcohol, tea, coffee, or water beverage. And so after the tincture, that typically, I don't eat mushrooms every day, I'll be honest, but I do consume them as a dietary supplement, and I think of them very much as my men's daily health vitamin. Along with taking my men's daily health vitamin, I also take, whether it's my tinctures or at lunch, maybe I'll eat a couple pieces of my chocolate that's like a 65% cacao, so it's a dark chocolate. The other mix, we try and keep as few ingredients as possible, keep them as healthy as possible, low sugar, low carb. And the most important thing is the potency, and for customers to understand the potency. When customers purchase our gummies and our chocolate, they're not purchasing a mushroom that's been powderized and put into the gummy or chocolate. What they're getting is an extract that's put into these products, so there's no mushroom flavor whatsoever that they have to worry about.
Yeah. Talk about is there... You mentioned gummies, and a lot of people are instantly going to think weed because that's generally where my head goes as well. Like, do people take mushrooms to go to sleep? Is there a similar thing for like there is with marijuana side of things as well?
So, cannabis works and functions on the endocannabinoid system.
Okay.
And so the cannabinoids that you can find at different dispensaries work on this system that's already within our bodies. So we produce these endocannabinoids, and that already go to our that's like 5-HTP2A receptor.
Okay.
And so, very scientific.
Sure.
I learned a lot of this.
Trust you on that.
I learned a lot of this in the lab, and so that might not be correct, but majority of the endocannabinoids that we have, the reason that cannabis functions on that is because we already have a system that accepts that. So mushrooms, even the psychoactive ones, don't function on the endocannabinoid system. They're completely different. And so for the mushrooms that are beneficial, like lion's mane that I mentioned earlier, this is one that typically helps with focus. It also helps with clarity. And so there are some supplements that will put it in a nighttime, but typically I will consume lion's mane in the morning and the day. Right. And at night I'll consume something like reishi, chaga, or turkey tail. Okay. And so now cordyceps and lion's mane are a great combo. Those are my two top sellers for people interested in eliminating brain fog and interested in energy without caffeine. Mm-hmm. And so mushrooms, there's a mushroom in particular called cordyceps. And this mushroom helps with energy, helps with oxygen circulation, stamina, even libido. And so this mushroom in particular, we put in an extract in a gummy. We also put it in chocolate and in the tinctures. And so what's interesting is there's different demographics for each product. Some customers are looking for a gummy. Some customers are looking for a gummy or a chocolate. And then some customers are looking for capsules and tinctures. And so, our customer base is very wide, and they're kind of in their own lane. The customer that buys tinctures typically won't buy chocolate. Mm-hmm. And so it's through them learning what are the benefits and how they want to consume them that customers kind of find, oh, okay, this mushroom is good for me at this time. And so cordyceps is not a mushroom that I would recommend taking at night, but I would recommend taking it in the morning to help put extra pep in your step. Yeah. Or if you're trying to reduce your coffee intake, you could start taking cordyceps, and you could take it through a gummy or a tincture or capsules. But the majority of the mushrooms that I take in the morning are going to be that lion's mane and cordyceps combo. Throughout the day, you can take turkey tail. It's great for immunity. You can take turkey tail and really any of these medicinal mushrooms anytime throughout the day, except for cordyceps is the only one I wouldn't recommend at night. Mm-hmm. And so cordyceps and lion's mane being the most that help with that brain fog, help with clarity. And so for those that are a bit sensitive, we don't want them to take that and be up all night and then not get the sleep they need. And so with our products, all of them being labeled as dietary supplements, we always recommend talking with your physician beforehand. Also learning more about the mushroom, whether it's coming and talking with me at my classes or my pop-ups or through email, and really helping you to understand why you want to take this mushroom. Because I have customers reach out all the time who are interested in reducing, whether it's with weight loss or it's with just reducing brain fog, and maybe they're not sure which mushroom they need to take. And so by reaching out to me, I can kind of help point you in the right direction, send you some of the research that we base our product dosages off of, and really just try and provide the opportunity for people to learn in the capacity they want to.
Yeah. Since you've been doing this, what's like your biggest kind of breakthrough moment that just, whether that's on, the education side or just one that stands out of like, wow, this is like, you have obviously fully believe in this and the product, and it clearly works. That's why you spend all your time traveling around the country doing it. Do you have any examples of other breakthroughs for people as well?
Seeing other people's stories with mushrooms,
or anything that stands out as just like a breakthrough moment that you're like, I'm on the right path here, I'm doing the right thing, and that might be someone coming to you, or it might be just your own exploration. I
would say the positivity, the emails, and the support that I received after the Mushroom Festival was something I never had anticipated. When I first thought of the Mushroom Festival and posted it online, I had received great response. But I had only initially planned for 35 vendors. We were going to rent the bottom floor at the Farmers Public Market, and it was going great. The ticket sales were really slow, I'll be honest with you. They were very slow until September came, and so that's a month before the event. So my family knew I was very stressed, and my friends knew that I was stressed. I was posting as much as I could, we were on billboards, we were on ads, we were partnering with restaurants, and really trying to do the work. And it was like a light turned on, and all of a sudden ticket sales just started rolling in. And, to be honest, when I was reaching out to vendors and sponsors, and everyone was like, well, Jacob, how many people are going to come to this first annual event? Oklahoma's not known for mushrooms. And how many people are going to come? And I was really hopeful for 300 to 500. And that was what I had told everyone. And so when I finally hit the 300 tickets sold, I jumped up and down. I was so grateful and so happy that I had hit at least the minimum that I had told. And that was a big relief. And so after that, posting online that we had sold 300 tickets, and then the 2 weeks after that, it jumped to 750. And so the ticket sales each week leading up to the event had doubled. And the day of the event, at the last ticket sale, we had 1,776 tickets sold for the first annual Oklahoma Mushroom Festival. It was an absolute rocking event. I don't know how even to describe it. We had vendors sell out within the first 4 hours, multiple vendors, including food vendors and market vendors. Right now, we have for the second annual event, we have close to 20 other vendors who were at our event last year that have now signed up for this year.
Yeah.
And so everyone who was involved was very supportive, very excited, and to see vendors who come back and say, wow, that event really helped to support me financially, or that event helped me to launch my business. That's really what I see the Mushroom Festival as, is a local opportunity for artists, for entrepreneurs. It's not just a mushroom festival. It's all about community. It's about the soil. And the theme for our event this year is loyal to the soil, because it's not just about mushrooms. It's about the earth in which the mushrooms come from, and the plants come from, and all of the insects and we come from. And so what we're trying to do is incorporate more well-roundedness into the event, and having plant and soil vendors and having wellness vendors. It's not just mushroom vendors. And so for those of you listening, there's not enough mushroom-only vendors in Oklahoma to make that happen.
Right.
Maybe one day, but for right now, what we typically see is about half of our vendors are 50% mushroom related. The other 50% being different categories of health and wellness, construction, etc.
Yeah.
And so I really think that the Mushroom Festival was a day that I realized, whoa, this is something I can keep doing. And since then, I've been very grateful to be hosting other events. I just helped launch a Mushroom Street in Florida at the Florida Groves Music Festival. So that was being able to have a successful in Oklahoma has opened a door for me to go other places, to host events there or to educate there. And I'm very excited for this year because we have some amazing speakers coming. Ranging from truffles to culinary chefs teaching about koji and fermentation, teaching about foraging, teaching about mycomaterials. We'll be doing women's health integration with mushrooms, and really providing the most up-to-date information from across the country in Oklahoma, so it's attainable for our community. And tickets start at $15. It's a family-friendly event, as it was last year. Kids under 13 are free. And it's an amazing time. We have 2 education stages, 1 workshop stage, 1 immersive experience room, which is built like a forest. So it gives people the sense of going out in a magical forest and foraging. We have live music in the immersive experience, as well as a kids station set up with balloons and coloring sheets, and everything's mushroom themed, of course.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where do you see it going? Where do you see this what's the 30,000 foot view of what you want to do when you look back in 30, 40 years and be like, yeah, you're already making an impact. If someone were to say to you now, you're done, you're never going to do this again, you've already made an impact. And so, which is great. But what's if you look back in 30, 40 years, is there one thing that stands out that you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I would say the mushroom guide. I think that is really my focus as a legacy of what I want to leave for Oklahoma, is to be that driving focus for us to have a guide. And not, of course, this one at 63 mushrooms is great, but it's not all of them. And so there's still a lot of really unique species out there that I don't have all the time to find. But what I hope to do is encourage people and be able to come out with new additions as I get older, as we find new mushrooms and new species. And really, the Mushroom Festival and the guide, those two things being my big gifts to our community. And hoping to see the Mushroom Festival grow into a nonprofit that could turn into a biannual, a yearly event. And not just, about mushrooms. It can be about soil and plants, and really grow into something, no pun intended, but much more than mushrooms. And we have Vegan Fest and Veggie Fest and Farmers Market Fest, and so why not Mushroom Festival? And so that's been my big goal, is to help reduce stigma. And I think that through having these mushroom events and through having the Mushroom Guide, our community will slowly start to break down those negative stigmas. And I would say one of my greatest accomplishments is working with the Girl Scouts, teaching young women ages 7 through 12 how to grow their own mushrooms, how to grow pink mushrooms in particular. And that was just so amazing and fulfilling for me, because not only did they get to accomplish and get a badge, but they also got to learn how to grow their own food. And when mom and dad show them how to harvest, they get to learn how to cook their own mushrooms. And so I really love the empowerment. I love empowering young adults, young women, young children, young men, everyone, how to live better, how to grow better. And I think that mushrooms are a great example with their symbiotic relationships and how they work with plants and insects, and that mutualism that they bring to the table. I really try and implement in my education and the way I interact with the community.
Yeah. Mate, it's awesome. I love it, and I love the passion you have for it. It's clear that it comes through in the way you speak about it, but also you're not just passionate about mushrooms, you're clearly well educated about it, and you love to learn continually, which is a huge resource to everyone, following you and reaching out. To that point, where do people find you? What's the website? What's your Instagram? And you mentioned YouTube as well and stuff like that, so where can they find you?
OklahomaFungi.com. On Facebook, it's Oklahoma Fungi, Oklahoma Fungi instead. And so on Instagram, Oklahoma Fungi, same thing. YouTube is official Oklahoma Fungi. And so that is mainly because YouTube still has these stigmas towards mushrooms. And so I had 140 videos on my channel that I've had for 3 years. And on February 8th of this year, I woke up to everything being taken down.
You're kidding.
And unfortunately, I lost a lot of videos, a lot of my early education classes with people that I'd met. Honestly, when I was teaching about things and saying it all wrong, all of the names I was pronouncing wrong and all of this and that, but I was still up there, still educating at my best. And I really liked it because it was like a personal diary, in a sense, a personal video log journal. But, unfortunately, YouTube has since taken that channel down, so I've relaunched as official Oklahoma Fungi.
Okay.
I also have Patreon, if you're familiar with Patreon. So I actually have paid tiers where people can interact with me. I can help them start growing mushrooms at home, or I can educate them on the benefits of medicinal mushrooms, or how to forage mushrooms, how to start a commercial grow. And so Patreon's a great way to get educated and also get direct communication with me. I'd say I've already talked about Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, and YouTube. Of course, the website being OklahomaFungi.com. And then for the festival, it is okmushfest.com or OklahomaMushroomFestival.com.
Okay.
And if you have any questions, Instagram is a great way. Facebook is a great way to reach out to me. And then email oklahomafungi@gmail.com being the last alternative.
Yeah. Well, Jacob, mate, thanks for your time. I know you're extremely busy. Safe travels on the road. I know you're about to head out here sometime soon. Well, whenever people are listening to this, you will likely be on the road. So safe travels. And for people listening, the second annual Mush Fest is going to be in October. And so it's going to be at the fairgrounds, which is a little bit of an upgrade from the farmers market. So that's really cool. But yeah, everything Jacob mentioned, I'll post down in the description. You can click on the links, go follow him on Instagram. Great following on Instagram, and a lot of education comes from that way. And it's an easy way to consume when you're laying in bed at night, doom scrolling when you should be going to sleep. But yeah, Jacob, thank you so much for coming in. And for people listening, we'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Much love. See ya.
Sick. Love that ending. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at citizensedmond, as well as go bank there because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password because I seem to forget it daily. So yeah, go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome. This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Bank's where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.